Welcome to the Mayor's Monthly Update. I'm Kate Reardon, Public Information Director for the City of Everett, and this is the time that we have each month to sit down with Mayor Ray Stephanson and talk about the issues that are important to you. So welcome.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. Finally, summer has arrived, and boy, it's just great seeing those long days of daylight and short nights, which is perfect. I love this time of year.
Absolutely, and the sunsets over Port Gardner Bay can't be beat.
Yeah, it's been beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we recently had the opportunity to celebrate quite a few young people at City Council.
We did.
Why don't you give us an update on that program?
Well, the Mayor's Youth Awards, Achievement Awards, occurs every year, and we interview a number of students who have been recommended by teachers and family members and other significant people in their lives. We had 7 award winners this year, ranging from grade school to high school. Some incredible people. I'm always amazed at the level of accomplishment, and not just in academics, but in helping people in their lives, the things they've overcome, in some cases health issues, others family-related issues. But to the individual, all winners. And I just, you and I have talked about it before, it really sort of restores your faith that oftentimes we hear the negative in the news, and then to see these great young people who are overcoming challenges and accomplishing and looking at life so positively, it's wonderful. So it's always one of the favorite events of the year. We hold it at City Council. Family and friends and teachers are able to be there and help celebrate with the young people, but lots of fun. And there are a couple of those individuals who are very interested in public life and serving their communities, and so I think we're going to be well served in the future. It was fun.
Great,
yeah.
Great. And along with that, we have the Mayor's Youth Council as well, which is a great opportunity for youngsters 14 to 18 to get involved in city life and have the opportunity to meet with you and talk about issues that we have going on in the city. Yeah,
and that's been a great group, and they support and help on Navy events and community activities, and they've been part of Hands-on Diversity with your work, Kate, which has been terrific. So it's just a great group of people in our community to spotlight and to tell the public just how wonderful they are and the great things they're doing.
Yeah, so we really don't need to worry too much about the future.
No.
It's in good hands, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's been a couple of months since Kimberly-Clark had officially closed its doors, and the city has been busy working on future vision for that property.
Right.
Where are we at today?
Well, I think I'd mentioned to the citizens before that the application for a demolition permit has been made. That had an appeal process. There was some concern by those who know of the historic buildings on that site that those buildings, and specifically the old administrative building, might be demolished before there was an opportunity to study it and determine its future. We were able to work with the Historic Commission about that process. What resulted was a very good outcome of no appeal through the demolition appeal process. So that permit will be issued any day, and we're going to begin to see buildings being demolished on that site. And I think that's a very important milestone, Kate, because it really signals to me that progress is going to occur in a way that first we see the demolition, then we see the cleanup of the soils, and it puts us every day closer to a redeveloped site. We've really gotten wonderful input from citizens. We've done an economic analysis of the kinds of companies that would be well served on that site. We continue that work. It's laborious work, and it really requires a lot of thought and a lot of patience. But we really, and I can't overstate this enough, we have just one opportunity to redevelop this site in a way that we can all be very proud of. And we just have to get it right. And so as we are now getting closer to the end of this first 6-month moratorium, we're going to have to decide whether to continue that for the next 6 months. That may be the prudent thing to do, and we're going to know here within the next few weeks whether we want an extension. But I've been very happy with the decision in my request to the council to do the moratorium and their support of it. If you remember, it was an emergency ordinance, then we had to come back and reaffirm. And so what that moratorium does, just as a reminder, even though there are parties who may be expressing interest about that site and what they might want to do in the future, that property can't be sold and reuse cannot occur until the moratorium is complete. And I suspect that what we're going to have out of this really comprehensive planning process is we're really going to start narrowing the kinds of uses that we envision for the future of that site. And that's really what this entire process is about. We want the right outcome in the future. We want to look down there 5, 10, 20 years from now and say, you know, we did it right. We paid attention. We were thoughtful about it, and we've come to something that we can be very proud of. So that's my goal in this.
Great. And of course, we want to remind folks that a large part of that goal really is job creation as well.
It is, exactly. Job creation scored very high with the public. Public access to the water has always been a huge concern of citizens in Everett, as it should be. We're going to have to figure out how we can accomplish that either on that site or somewhere else as a way of mitigating it. The interesting thing about the Kimberly-Clark site, it is deep water, which is unusual. It's not the norm in terms of being able to handle ships and occupations that require deep water. So that is really a protected kind of status that we have to pay attention to. And the other thing is that if a water-dependent reuse makes sense, the actual access to water at that particular point may not be, we may not be able to accomplish it. So my thought is that if we're not able to necessarily do it there or do it there in a real robust way, we want to be looking for other opportunities to create that public access to the water. And so it is a goal in all of this, and one that I'm very mindful of, and we'll watch it closely.
Great. I was talking to some high school students not so long ago about the city and what we have going on, and when I mentioned to them that the city is surrounded on water by 3 sides, they thought, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Is that possible? But if you truly do look at an aerial of the city, we have water 3 sides, the river delta, salt water, fresh water. So it is a pretty amazing place.
Yeah, it is.
Another reminder for folks on the Kimberly-Clark piece is that we're talking about privately owned property as well.
That's true.
So how does that compare to if we were looking at say a publicly owned piece of property?
I'm glad you asked that, because we have, the city has land use authority, so we can identify in certain kinds of zoning, this is industrially zoned land. What we would have to do is, if there are some uses that we just do not believe would benefit the community, would benefit the reuse of that site, we're going to have to specifically prohibit them. And so that's what we can do from a land use perspective. We cannot control, once we do that, once the moratorium is lifted, as long as they meet those standards, those land use standards, Kimberly-Clark is really free to sell that property really to anybody. The maximum control we would have, frankly, is if that property were in public ownership. And that possibility, albeit not something that we're discussing right now, it certainly could occur. You could see a port purchase of that property. You could see a city purchase or a city port purchase of that property. Then we would have maximum control, but we want to make sure that we understand the liability of that property. We certainly don't want to, for example, acquire that property and then find out that we have huge liability around cleanup. So it's a decision for another day once we know more about the condition of the soil, the cost of cleanup, and the rest. But I think all of those options, as far as I'm concerned, are on the table, and we should be very, approach this with an open mind in terms of how we get to the eventual reuse.
Great. All right. So with that, we're going to take a break real quick. So we will be right back with the Mayor's Monthly Update right after this.
Puget Sound starts here, and here, and even here. But the water we use goes down the drain into our streams and Puget Sound. Millions of gallons of oil and pollution. But we can fix the problem before we kill the sound. Like growing yards with fewer chemicals, car washes that recycle water, even scooping the poop.
We need to talk.
Puget Sound starts here, and so does our future.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Monthly Update. This is the time that we have each month to talk to Mayor Ray Stephanson about the issues that are important to you. And we're just in the middle of our show, and we're just getting ready to talk about the next topic, which is Asarco contamination up in North Everett. But we have some new things to share.
We do. I think by way of background, and I don't want to get into this too deeply, but in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was an Asarco mill in Everett. Obviously at the time, contamination was not a subject that was really well understood or well known. That mill closed, I believe, in 1912, and the city, and we're not unusual, cities around the state, around the country, around the world, frankly, have been victims of contamination. But there were certain areas of the soil that were contaminated. Shortly after I was elected mayor, one of the areas that we first concentrated on was actually where the mill sat. That's at 529 East Marine View Drive, basically. And huge amounts of soil were removed, new soil brought in partnership with the Everett Housing Authority. That area has been completely redeveloped, and it now is a multifamily housing development, which is really a very nice development. The other thing that's occurred is ecology has continued to test in sort of bands away from where the mill was. And over the last several years, including this last year and the next 12 months, ecology has been going in and actually removing soil and replacing soil in residential property, in and around the golf course, close to that general area where the mill was. And that work is going to continue at least for another 12 months. The other thing ecology decided to do, and really I was very happy that they did this, they tested two parks that are in proximity. One is Wiggums Hollow. Most of Wiggums Hollow the contaminated soil was removed a few years ago when that park was redeveloped. But there are still some areas that are areas where contamination levels exceed 200 parts per million. Not significantly dangerous, but soil that by their standards they would want to replace. This time they also tested Legion Park in and around the ball fields and the general park area. The ball fields soil was removed and replaced several years ago, so the ball fields are completely clear, but there are some contaminants around the arboretum and around the edges of the park. And so what you're going to see today is, if you go out there, we've put signage up, and we're going to put more signage that just gives helpful hints in terms of how to protect yourself against that contaminated soil. Now, I would say where the kids' play area is, and so I want to be real, I want to make sure everyone understands this, that is a cement pad that's been inserted with chips, so in and around the kids' play equipment, it's safe. There's not a problem there. The other thing that is the biggest problem is the ingestion of soil. Now, you would ask yourself who's going to eat dirt, but like little kids, everything is like from hand to mouth. So that's the thing that you really need to watch out for. And you'd have to be talking about that kind of exposure over long periods of time. But the point here is, we've tested, we now know where the contaminants are. Once the residential areas are cleaned up as the first priority, then a plan will be developed to clean up the 2 parks that I'm talking about. This is money from an Asarco settlement, so this isn't city revenue that we're having to put into the cleanup. This is actually part of the settlement against Asarco. And so the resources are there. It's just a matter of scheduling. So it is, it's just the normal things that you would think about in terms of protecting yourself. Wash your hands, just watch your kids to make sure the little ones aren't putting dirt in their mouth, keep your shoes clean, the basic things. And the stations out there that are the signs that we've put out there will go through a 5 or 6 step process just to make sure you protect yourself. But I want to make sure, Kate, that we mention this really in the spirit of full disclosure, but this isn't a serious problem. I want to make sure that I'm real clear about that. Are there contaminants there? Yes. Do we want to remove them in the future on a scheduled, thoughtful way? Absolutely. Are they terribly dangerous? No, that is not the case. You just have to follow some precautions. But we really felt that looking at this broadly, making sure we knew exactly what we have and what we have to deal with is the best way to go. And I'm happy with the way we've gone about it.
Right, and the partnership with Ecology and the Health District, and of course we're not asking park users to do anything really differently than they should already be doing, washing your hands. Exactly right. Making sure that you're not dragging a bunch of dirt back into your house when you get home, that sort of thing. So parks are safe, but there is some attention that we need to give to them in the future.
That's right, exactly right.
So let's talk about aerospace. Boeing has been on our minds forever. Yeah. But what's going on with aerospace, the aerospace cluster in and around Everett?
Well, first of all, I would say that we are so blessed to have Boeing in our community and all the aerospace suppliers. It is such a huge part of our economy. People often ask me, what would life be like without Boeing? I don't even want to imagine it. So it would be hard. It would be hard for me to imagine. But it's a very competitive business. It is ever-changing, new technologies, a constant drive for lighter airplanes, alternative fuels, anything that would really make flying more and more cost-effective. We're blessed to have 787 and the composite airplane. It'll be a success for, decades to come. But just, when you think that you've got that nailed, and the 737 MAX and Renton and some labor piece, which is tremendously important, now you got to start thinking about the next generation of 777. This is one of the most popular airplanes in the world. I think they got to 1,000 airplanes sold faster than any other airplane in their history. But again, here's a situation where technology is moving ahead. It most probably will not be a composite airplane, but a lighter aluminum, titanium, some lighter, harder structure in the future. But the city of Everett, Snohomish County, the Economic Alliance Snohomish County have partnered together to prepare ourselves for being competitive and ensuring that that next generation of 777 is built in Everett. And I would tell you, it is not a foregone conclusion. We're going to have to compete. We're going to have to make sure we mitigate transportation issues. We've done a lot around education, both technical education as well as getting a research institution here in Washington State University. But we cannot rest. And so even though this is not on anyone's radar screen right now, we think the Boeing company will be making a decision in the next 18 to 24 months. And we want to put Everett in the best possible place and best possible competitive place that we can. And so we're taking it very seriously. We're working hard to do everything we can to make this the most attractive site for the Boeing company. So when they decide on Everett, Washington.
Mm-hmm. And this really is a great example of where we're at, on a global scale with our new economy too.
It is. We think Airbus, that's the big competitor, and it obviously is, and they've had some delivery and production problems. But Canada, South America, China, countries around the globe are building airplanes. And so that's the future. And we're lucky that we have Boeing. They're really on the forefront of new technologies. The more you learn about composites, the more you learn about lighter materials. They're really on it's called the bleeding edge of that technology evolution. And so they know they have to stay competitive, and we know we have to stay competitive to keep them here. So we're paying a lot of attention to it. You're going to be reading more about it as time goes on. But I just want our citizens to know that we, one, take this very seriously. We know how important it is, and there's just a whole lot of activity going on below the surface to make sure that we stay competitive.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. And we'll wrap up the show today with Navy. Navy is always important to us as well.
Yes.
Takes a great deal of our waterfront. But we have to always be mindful of what's going on in the Navy as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It's, Boeing is obviously the largest employer by far. The Navy is our second largest employer. Nearly 7,000 people at Naval Station Everett bring about $300+ million in salaries to our community every year. Those are people buying groceries and cars and buying houses and renting houses, and it runs the gamut. And we've had some really nice investments in Naval Station Everett over the last 5 years, since the last base realignment and closure process. But about every 5 years, Congress goes through this process. I don't think you're going to see it start during this presidential year, frankly. I think the politics of it are just too, at a national level, are too uncertain, I guess, to be kind. But I think in the next 12, 18, 24 months, there's going to be a call for another process. And basically a base realignment and closure process forces every military base to look at its mission, look at its cost, and re-justify its existence. The Naval Station Everett has been through 4 base realignment and closure processes in 15 years. In fact, we went through one before the base was even open, and we've had to re-justify its existence. So again, we're focusing with the partners I talked about, Snohomish County, the Alliance, and the city, to make sure that the Pentagon, the military, continues to understand the value of this base, understands its capability, understands the community support, all the things that are important to the future of that base. Rick Larson, our congressman, announced that when the frigates leave, we're going to get 3 destroyers to replace those frigates. That's very good news. The other thing that's good news, that even though the military budget nationally will be reduced, there's going to be a redeployment of naval assets. Today, about 50% of the ships are on the East Coast, about 50% on the West Coast. It's going to change. 60% are going to be on the West Coast and about 40% on the East Coast. And that's really because of the world threat in the Far East. China, North Korea, other areas of concern in the Far East that we need to make sure that we pay attention to. And the other thing that the Navy is beginning to look at and study is that with global warming, the ice cap is disappearing, and the protection of the North Sea, of the Arctic, is going to become more and more important in the future. And when you look at Everett and you look at Washington State and how we are geographically situated, we can get there to protect that asset quicker than really anywhere in the world. And so I think that geographically we're placed well, but again, it's one of those situations, Kate, where you've got to do your homework, you've got to make your case, you've got to help the Pentagon and the military leaders understand the value of Naval Station Everett, and we take that very seriously. And so that work is going on, and so it's, you know, oftentimes it sounds like, you know, if we're not dealing with the budget, we're dealing with job growth, but all things are possible in an improving economy. Our ability to invest in our parks and invest in our library. You know, one of the things I want to see occur in the next few years is an expansion of the Evergreen Branch Library. Well, the way to do that is to get people back to work, to get unemployment low, to get revenues robust again in our community so we can make those important investments. And that's why we spend so much time worrying and working on aerospace and the Navy, and always mindful of our expenses, making sure that we're living within our means. So that there is a method to this madness, and at times it seems like madness, and it seems like it just takes a long time and a lot of hard work, and again, things that our citizens probably don't see on a day-to-day basis. But I just want every resident of Everett to know that we take these responsibilities very seriously. We work them very hard. We partner with who we need to partner with to give us our greatest chance of success. So we're working it hard, and I think we're going to have a very bright future.
Well, thanks for the update, and we'll keep people posted about the different processes going on, and we'll see you again next month.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kate.
And thank you for joining us for the Mayor's Monthly Update. We'll see you again in August.